Hello and welcome to this tutorial. Today I will show you how to paint this sweet little goldfinch with watercolors. So let's get started. My photo reference is from Pixabay and I will have the link to that photo in the video description. I started with a peachy color for the beak by mixing Naples yellow and alizarin crimson. I wet the beak first with plain water. I'm using Fabriano cold press paper and Winsor & Newton and Daniel Smith tube watercolors for this painting. I will have a list of all the supplies I used in the video description. Here I'm using Scarlet Lake to paint the feathers on the head, which I pre-wet as well. This demonstration is in real time with just some of the paint mixing and other little things edited out, and so this is probably the longest video I have posted yet on my channel. You can speed up or slow down the playback speed in YouTube settings, and I would like to know if these longer videos are useful, so please let me know in the comments if you would like to see more longer videos like this one. For the lower beak, I used the same peachy color with a little brown ochre mixed in to darken it. The top beak is dry. I'm also using a little bit of neutral tint on the very tip of the beak. I'm painting the eye on dry paper using indigo, and I'm painting around the highlight. Now I'm going to add some texture and shadow to the top of the head. I start by pre-wetting the area again, careful not to disturb the first layer. Then I lightly drop in some quinacridone violet, dabbing it around to create a subtle feather texture by the beak and eye. Then with my clean brush, I drop in some pure water to diffuse the violet a little more for some subtlety. I do the same thing on the throat area. On this area on the back of the neck, I pre-wet it and I'm adding indigo into the wet area. I am making sure the edges are soft and fuzzy. I'm also adding indigo to this area of the face on pre-wet paper. I'm dragging some strokes to the dry paper along the beak and throat as well to create a few hard edges of feather texture. I'll also paint really carefully around the eye, or at least as careful as I can. By the way, if you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to see more tutorials in watercolor and other media, please consider subscribing to my channel. I appreciate your support, and I'm here to help you in any way that I can as you learn how to draw and paint. This section of the head here is white feathers, and I'm using a very watery, neutral tint to create some shadow areas, also on paper that I wet ahead of time. I'm using my clean damp brush here to lift some of that pigment since it was a little darker than I wanted. Now I'm painting some brown ochre around the eye. This little strip of feathers up here is done with indigo on dry paper. Back to these dark feathers, I'm wetting the area again and I'm adding some lamp black on top. If you don't like using black watercolor paint, you can mix your own if you like. I'm trying to make some fine strokes along the beak, but as fine-tipped as my brush is, it's not quite fine enough and I should have used a smaller brush. Notice that on the eye, I painted around some of that indigo for a mid-tone highlight. On the back of the neck here, I'm just painting little strokes on dry paper and adding a little water to blend it in the center. I pre-wet the paper on the throat and I'm adding a little neutral tint for a shadow. I'm starting the yellow part of the wing now, using Winsor Lemon on dry paper. Just as a side note, I love sharing my art videos with you, and I would really like to know what kinds of tutorials you'd like to see in future videos. My channel is small and I haven't gotten many suggestions, and I want to make sure I'm making videos you want to see. So please do me a favor and leave your suggestions in the comments, and I would really love to paint your ideas. For the light brown color on his back, I mixed gold ochre, brown ochre, Naples yellow, and a touch of neutral tint so it wasn't too warm. I pre-wet the back first before dropping in the color. For the darker brown feathers, I added some brown ochre to the neutral brown mix, and I dropped it in while the area was still wet. I used the same colors in a lighter concentration for the chest area, and also added some brown ochre for the darker areas. For the area below the wing here, I just added a little more gold ochre to that mix for more of a light beige, and added shadows with more concentrated gold ochre. For the tail area here, I'm painting wet on dry to differentiate those long feather strokes. I'm using brown ochre. I'm painting partially wet on wet to soften the strokes and create a smooth transition from dark to light towards the bottom here. I re-wet the beige area here under the wing so I can add more feather texture with my gold ochre mix. I used indigo to paint the top of the wing, carefully avoiding the white spots and stripes. I'm painting this on dry paper. I'm also painting the wing with indigo on dry paper. I'm going slowly and following what I see on the reference photo. I'm painting indigo again on these long tail feathers. For the shadow on the belly, I mixed neutral tint with brown ochre and painted it wet on wet. I'm darkening it here a little bit, and I use my damp brush to wipe away some of that paint to create a soft transition. On his back, I'm using a clean damp angle brush to lift away some of the pigment to create a highlight. I just drag the brush across the top, wipe it on my paper towel, and then I drag it again to keep lifting off some of that paint. Back to this area below the wing, the paper is barely damp, and I'm using these light little strokes of brown ochre to create more subtle texture. Then I clean my brush and soften the strokes a bit with my clean, damp brush. The wing is creating a cast shadow, and I'm painting this using neutral tint. It has a hard edge because it is a cast shadow, so I'm painting it wet on dry. And I'm using the same neutral tint below the tail and the back of the leg feathers. I also add some more neutral tint on the belly to darken those feathers. I also use neutral tint on the head where the white feathers meet the beige. I'm just using tiny strokes on dry paper to create that feather texture. I'm using this stippling technique with very watery neutral tint to make more feather texture on his back. Below his wing, I use the same technique with a watery brown ochre. Adding a little more neutral tint, wet on dry, below the tail feathers and on the belly. For the long wing and tail feathers, I'm adding lamp black to separate them. This is on dry paper. A little more detailing here with gold ochre, again on dry paper. With my angle brush again, I'm lifting some paint between the black strokes to create a highlight. I like using indigo as a base for black because it lifts quite nicely for highlights. On the head, I'm using Scarlet Lake wet on dry to create more feather strokes into the white area here. I'm also intensifying the color by adding little strokes around the head and then some more quinacridone violet in the shadow areas. Moving on to the feet now, I start with a watery brown ochre painting on dry paper. I'm just outlining the legs and toes, and then I use a damp brush to blend it toward the center. For the claws, I mixed brown ochre with neutral tint to create a deep brown color. I'm also using a damp brush to soften some of the edges. I use that same dark brown to add behind the middle toe to create a shadow. I'm going back over the leg with brown ochre. The leg is dry now. I want to create just some subtle texture. I do want to keep some form and shape, but I don't want it to be too detailed. To paint the branch, I used brown ochre on top and brown ochre mixed with neutral tint on the bottom. I pre-wet the branch area so that the two colors would come together and mix on the paper. I'm also adding in some little drops of plain water, which makes the paint disperse and just creates some more interesting texture on the branch. And while it's still wet, I add some more neutral tint and even some quinacridone violet just for some interesting colors. On the area of the branch above the foot, I start with the quinacridone violet, and then I drop in the neutral tint in the darker areas. I also add a touch of brown ochre. On the feet, I glaze some watery brown ochre, and on the darkest shadow of the branch, I add even a little bit more neutral tint to really darken that shadow. I'm using gold ochre to create shadows on the yellow wing feathers. There's a shadow where one feather overlaps the other. This is on dry paper. To add some fluff, I'm using my liquid ink and a detail brush, and I will add it in just a few areas of the goldfinch. This ink is nice and opaque, but you could also use acrylic paint or gouache if you have it. Thank you for watching this video and hanging out with me for 41 minutes. Again, if you enjoyed it and it helped you with your watercolor painting, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to see more drawing and painting tutorials. And don't forget to let me know what you would like to learn in future videos. Happy painting, and I hope you join me for my next tutorial. Bye!